Therapy Geeks mini episode. Luke and Louise interpret a dream. But yes, welcome to the Dream Team. We're going to be discussing a dream that I've had this week, because we were just saying there before recording, weren't we, Louise, that like sometimes you go through a period where you have a shit ton of dreams, and then there's a period where you have just none, and your unconscious is dead silent, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's happened to me.
Yes, that's happened to you right now, and I'm having the opposite, where I had like 4 or 5 in a row. And so, what I'll do when I wake up and have them is I'll like say them into the voice recorder on my phone, and I'll forget to write them down. And by the time I write them down, it's like 2 weeks later, and they've lost all meaning. But these are quite recent. I managed to snatch these and write them down, and even try and interpret them. So yeah, we'll see what comes of it. But okay, so this dream involves some people I know in real life. So I'm going to maybe change their names. So
yes, please do.
So the two people in this dream are one of them's called, we'll call him Damien, and the other one is called Lucy, we'll say. Okay, and so Damien is a learning disabled adult who I worked with when I was a support worker a year and a bit ago, and Lucy is his mum, and we Lucy and I sometimes got along and sometimes we didn't, because as is often the nature with care homes and support work, is sometimes that can be at odds with what the parent wants and vice versa. So okay, so that's the context. In this dream, some sort of accident has happened. Damien has died, and I'm sitting on the doorstep of a house. I'm pretty sure it's Lucy's house, though I know what Lucy's house looks like in real life, and it's not that house in the dream. I don't know what I'm there for. I'm there to pay condolences or apologize, but either way, I'm crying, and Lucy arrives, and she's very angry and sarcastic, unsympathetic, and blames me almost immediately, and quite aggressive even. And I say, that's horrible. I'm not going to say anything back, because obviously she suffered this horrible loss, and she's still sarcastic. So end of dream. What stands out to you?
You're vulnerable. You're feeling vulnerable.
Oh yeah.
The fact that this is people that these are like service user clients, or that were in your life, but still this the responsibility is still in an unconscious, subconscious way, but it's I always love whenever it's like you're at a house but it's not her house. That kind of what is that about? What does the house represent? But you're sitting at the house crying, but it's not her house. So whose house was it? What do homes and houses represent? Because Damien didn't live with his mother.
Well, so it was sort of, he was there a chunk of the week, and then he was at my workplace the other chunk of the week, mostly because he was very locked into a routine, and there was difficulty in that the trust was funding him to live in our workplace 24/7, and his mum thought that he wouldn't want to commit to that. So she said, well, we'll start off with 5 days a week in this place and we'll work it up. But I think she knew full well that he would get locked into that routine. And I'm pretty sure he's still in there 5 days a week now. And the trust is sort of was trying to put pressure on me whenever I worked there to try and just sort of force him to stay the extra 2 days against him and his own mother's will. But I imagine that's still probably a stalemate.
There you go. That's what it's about.
Right.
So it's about the confusion, the vulnerability, and you're worried about it. Still, he's there in your subconscious still, even though you're not there. Your subconscious is thinking what's happening there, and that's a very difficult situation. It's a very difficult situation because the home is so important, I think, in terms of welfare and well-being. And I think that shows your vulnerability and your sorrow.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's a good interpretation so far. Because I hadn't really considered quite a lot of that. Like the idea of course, a home being that safe space, and it's not a home in that dream for anyone. Weirdly, isn't that interesting? It's a place for recovery and all that stuff. Yeah, I think you're onto something there when you focus on the counterfactual, which is that's a word that's a word that's used in Gendlin's theories of dreams, where it's like, because so many people when they tell you a dream, they'll say, oh, it was my uncle, but it wasn't.
Yes.
And that's it. Yeah. So that's counterfactual. Like it's my house, but it's not, or it's I nearly said his name there. I'll edit that out. It's Damien's house, but it's not. And and like, so that's counterfactual, which means that's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, and I think always this is why I love that, because it's the home. I think it's a home being a safe place. And it's like, I've worked in different residential homes and everything, right? And they're amazing people working there, brilliant talent. But it's very, very hard. It's just like my home here and staff, you know what I mean? It's just hard. I think it's hard because for me, I don't know about, it's family. It's like, they're not your family, they're staff.
Yes.
Do you know? Whereas I do think, I don't know. I think the fact you're crying is that her house, not her house, she's angry, aggressive, sarcastic. So she's angry. So it's all the forms of anger. It's even the passive aggressive, the aggressive, there's just anger. So it's like, what is Lucy represent? Is Lucy representing injustice? Is Lucy representing, what is Lucy represents? Parents or mothers?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah.
Her anger, because were you there to say, like, Damien's died, but were you there to break that news to her, or were you there to try and say, well, we had something?
It's unclear.
Yeah.
It's very unclear. I also think, isn't it really telling how I write, so she's angry and sarcastic, and then I say unsympathetic. Isn't that interesting that I'm expecting sympathy from her when her son has died in this dream?
Oh, this is wonderful, because because our jobs require us to be emotionally invested, like people who care. Like, the core conditions are to care, basically, to love and to really hold space, right?
Yeah.
But there's boundaries there. So we're humans. So those so they're professional boundaries, but actually we're required to do a job that actually historically would have been there for family members, and that caring. And in many cultures it still is. You care. Who cares for the most vulnerable in tribes? Who cares for them? The tribe. Whereas, do you know what? Whereas it's somebody like you get emotionally invested, but you're supposed to. So you're like a family member, but you're not. So that kind of. So Damien's death, and this actually reminds me of, when I was pregnant once, I was supporting somebody, and because I became, I had to stop doing it because I had there were issues with I just was very sick during my pregnancy, right? So I couldn't do it. And I remember they died, and I found out in a really weird way, but because I wasn't that,
yes,
I wasn't thought of. Because I was a worker. There was a lot of workers.
Your family, but you're not, like you're saying. Yeah.
So you're very personal relationship, very intimate in many ways, like really helping these people, but you're not kind of. So whenever I was like, I am so sorry, I can't believe it. When's the funeral? And they were like, it was like a few weeks ago. And I was like, what?
That must have been gotten. I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, because I'd had to stop because I couldn't lift the person. I couldn't do that. So, but you were just and that's where I think that dream might be saying, like, there's emotions involved. It's okay. You still care. You can't just switch it off because you're not being paid anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like so much is expected of you, and yet so little in some ways. Yeah. Could I share with you what I wrote actually shortly after the dream, my first interpretation of it?
Yes, go for it.
It actually misses quite a few of the really good points that I think you were hitting on about, vulnerability and the house and confusion. And also, I should have provided you a bit more context here as well, is that, there were some people I was like keen on staying friends with after I left that job. And I did make some effort, but it just didn't seem to sort of be going anywhere. And the day that I'd had that dream, I, had found out that one of them had like a Halloween party and I hadn't been invited, which is such a childish thing, but to be upset about. But I imagine that it maybe manifested itself in there, like, oh, okay, why am I not allowed in? Which maybe that figures into the sitting on the doorstep rather than being inside thing there.
Do you think that was quite important?
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe I should have led with that, shouldn't I?
yeah, I think that makes it. I think it's great for your old job and the amount of emotions and the family kind of. I think that's it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it certainly feels a lot more because when it comes to dream interpretation, obviously there's no right answer, but there is a certain vibe. You feel like whenever you're on the right track with something, or you maybe test an interpretation, and you feel a little pang or something in your chest, and you go, oh, okay, that's how I know that's right, a bodily sensation. And I'm getting
Yes.
more of that from this than from my initial written response, which was, I go through a little process. So, first thoughts were some sort of feeling of grief or pain or anger or blame. I think pain being the prevailing feeling, that it hurts to be spoken to like that so often. I tried to think of something, an association, and it made me think of, I used to work in the Empire Bar a decade ago now, nearly more, and one of the managers there really, really hated me, and he didn't make a huge secret of it, but there was one time he started openly insulting me, and I remember going completely quiet and simply just walking while he spoke to me until we were in an open area and all the other managers could hear him personally insulting me. And then I was able to make a complaint against him, because it's like, I shouldn't be, he shouldn't be able to speak to me like that. It was really horrible little personal stuff.
Yes.
So, and I think that's maybe whenever I wrote that, I was saying that maybe that memory was coming up because my response in the dream was to go quiet and say nothing. But yeah, I write there. Then again, why am I waiting on Lucy's doorstep where I'm sure to receive an unwelcome response? Am I masochistic? Does Lucy represent a sort of shame that can't be reasoned with, only reasonably met with silence? And that seemed to sort of resonated whenever I wrote that down. And then I tried to sort of, one of the things, the things that some people do with dreams is try and let it continue in your head, because the dream doesn't always finish. So I tried to just sort of go back into the dream in my head and let it continue and see what happens. And when I let it continue, she just sort of goads further and calls me things while I sit miserably at the step. And I say, I'm sorry for your loss, and go. And she shouts at me until I'm out of sight. Sometimes as well, some of the Gestalt dream theorists, they'll say to try and be one of the dream symbols that you experience. So, I tried to be her, right? I tried to be Lucy from this dream, and I tried to embody her. And when I do that, I stiffen up and gesticulate like Hitler doing a speech, and I want to shout, get out of my sight, how dare you be here after what happened. And and then I wrote about the counterfactual house thing, that it was his house but it wasn't. So and I do need to specify that Lucy is not the sort of person who would gesticulate like Hitler. I just mean whenever I try and be the dream version of her. But
yeah, it's archetypes.
Yeah,
I think it's archetypes. It's not Lucy. Lucy represents, I think Lucy represents conflict, or like so if you think about it,
we did have a lot of conflict now, Lucy and I.
Yeah, but that I think that would be quite common for stressed parents dealing with services.
Oh no, I'm not saying that she shouldn't have ever been, but
no.
Yeah, but it was incredibly unpleasant, and yes. sometimes beyond what should have been allowed, and yes. and I would have to sometimes leave conversations because they were just verbally and one time physically abusive. So not great. But
this is brilliant, look, because I think this is showing you how sensitive you are, which is wonderful.
I don't need to hold how sensitive I am.
But it's reminding you that it's okay. Like, it's like, the grief is like, I think it's very important for a lot of men to hear this, because the vulnerability, I think there's strength in sensitivity, but for a lot of people, right, they keep opening to it and they experience it and they feel it and they don't let it harden them.
Yeah. Like,
do you see what I mean?
I think I see what you mean. And I also think there's something to be said for what you're saying about sometimes we need to grieve like jobs and places where we spent time. I was in that place for 7 years.
Yes.
And I, the summary I wrote from my interpretation there was, I have pain, anger, shame related to that job, and a part of me wants to stay away, and another part wants to stay on the doorstep, apologize in some way. Maybe silence is the response here. I don't owe those people anything. Nobody's come looking for me. Like this, what I wrote, and I think. But no, that's meant to be like a relaxing thing to say, like, well, it's not like anyone's come looking for it, but it's sad. Well, it is, yeah. And I think it's also an entreaty to an invite to just let it go. Stop trying to be friends with these people. You know, they're not putting in the effort to stay friends with you. So time to let it go, you know.
Yes, and also for new things to come into our life, you have to make space.
You know, yeah, actually, that's a really good. There's a really good book I'm reading at the minute called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. I don't know why I'm holding it up to the camera when we're on a podcast, which is an audience or an audio medium, so a visual cue for an audience of one. But there's this, it's great. It's, you know, it's very much in the line of Yalom in a way, which is like, you know, books about therapy told from the perspective of a therapist who also goes to therapy. And I think like there's such compelling, you know, Yalom's books are so compelling. I'm like wonder why this isn't a bigger genre, because, you know, it's incredible. But anyway, it's a great book. But in that book there, she was saying that, like, you know, it's probably just a platitude, but I think it helps with some clients to frame it in this way, is that, you know, there's no change in your life without some sort of loss. And maybe when people are struggling to make some sort of change in their life, then that's because they're afraid of what the loss could be. And, you know, what loss do you need to be comfortable with for you to get the change that you're looking for?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. I feel like that's good. I think we should wrap up on that.
Yeah, well, that was a great dream, and I hope it's helped you process it and move on.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye, audience.
Bye.
Therapy Geeks can be found on YouTube or your podcasting platform of choice. Until love came.